The book of 1 Samuel is a story about leadership, about what happens when people choose their own way instead of God's, and about how God often chooses the most unlikely people to accomplish his greatest purposes. The story begins during a difficult time in Israel's history. The period of the judges is coming to an end. The nation is spiritually drifting. The priesthood has become corrupt. Everyone is looking for leadership. But before God raises up a king, he first raises up a prophet. His name is Samuel. The story begins with a woman named Hannah. She desperately longs to have a child. Year after year she prays. Year after year she waits. Her heart is broken. One day she goes to the tabernacle and pours out her soul before God. She prays so passionately that Eli the priest mistakes her silent prayers for drunkenness. But Hannah explains her grief. She tells God that if he gives her a son, she will dedicate him back to the Lord. God hears her prayer. In time, Hannah gives birth to a son. She names him Samuel, meaning heard by God. True to her promise, when Samuel is old enough, Hannah brings him to the tabernacle. She leaves him there to serve the Lord. It must have been one of the hardest moments of her life. But Hannah trusted God with the very gift he had given her. As Samuel grows, the contrast between him and Eli's sons becomes impossible to ignore. Eli's sons are priests, but they abuse their position. They steal from the sacrifices. They dishonor God. They take advantage of the people. The spiritual leaders of Israel have become corrupt. Then one night, while Samuel is still a young boy, something remarkable happens. He hears his name being called, Samuel. Thinking it is Eli, he runs to him. But Eli says he did not call. This happens again and again. Finally, Eli realizes what is happening. God is speaking to the boy. So Samuel listens. And for the first time, God speaks directly to him. It is the beginning of Samuel's calling as a prophet. As Samuel grows older, all of Israel recognizes that God is speaking through him. Meanwhile, the Philistines continue threatening Israel. In one battle, Israel makes a terrible mistake. Instead of seeking God, they treat the Ark of the Covenant like a lucky charm. They carry it into battle believing it will guarantee victory. But God will not be manipulated. Israel is defeated. The Ark is captured. And Eli's two sons are killed. When Eli hears the news, he falls backward from his chair and dies. It seems like Israel has lost everything. But even in defeat, God remains in control. The Philistines place the ark inside the temple of their god, Dagon. The next morning, Dagon's statue has fallen face down before the ark. They set it back up. The following morning, it has fallen again. This time, its head and hands are broken off. Then disease begins spreading throughout the Philistine cities. The message becomes clear. Israel's God is not defeated simply because his ark has been captured. Eventually, the terrified Philistines return the ark to Israel. Years pass. Samuel faithfully leads the nation. Then, as he grows old, the people make a surprising request. They ask for a king, not because God has failed them, but because they want to be like the surrounding nations. Samuel is heartbroken. But God tells him something important. They have not rejected you. They have rejected me as their king. Still, God allows them to have what they ask for. A man named Saul is chosen. He looks exactly like the king people expected. Tall, strong, handsome, confident. Everything about Saul appears impressive. At first, he leads well. He wins battles. The nation celebrates. Everything seems promising. But success begins changing Saul's heart. Pride quietly replaces humility. During one battle, Saul becomes impatient and offers a sacrifice that only the priest was supposed to offer. Instead of waiting for God's timing, he takes matters into his own hands. Samuel confronts him. God desires obedience more than religious rituals. Later, God commands Saul to completely destroy the Amalekites. Instead, Saul keeps the best livestock and spares King Agag. He obeys partially, but partial obedience is still disobedience. When Samuel confronts him again, Saul makes excuses. He blames others. He insists he mostly obeyed. But Samuel gives one of the most memorable statements in the book. To obey is better than sacrifice. Because Saul continually rejects God's commands, God rejects Saul as king. Then the story shifts. God sends Samuel to Bethlehem, to the house of a man named Jesse. One of Jesse's sons will become the next king. Samuel sees Jesse's oldest son and immediately assumes he must be God's choice. He looks like a king. But God stops him. Man looks at the outward appearance, but the Lord looks at the heart. One by one, Jesse's sons pass before Samuel. None of them are chosen. Finally, Samuel asks, "Are these all your sons?" Jesse remembers one more, the youngest, David, a shepherd boy watching the sheep. Hardly anyone expected him, but God did. David is brought in, and God tells Samuel, "This is the one." David is quietly anointed king. But Saul still sits on the throne. The transition will take years. Soon another famous story unfolds. The Philistines gather for battle. Their champion steps forward, a giant named Goliath, over 9 feet tall, covered in armor. Every day he challenges Israel. Every day the army retreats in fear. Then David arrives, not as a soldier, simply delivering food to his brothers. He hears Goliath mocking God. While everyone else sees an unbeatable giant, David sees an opportunity to trust the Lord. Saul offers him armor. David refuses. Instead, he takes only a sling and 5 smooth stones. As Goliath laughs, David declares that the battle belongs to the Lord. 1 stone flies. The giant falls. Israel erupts in victory. David becomes a national hero overnight. But his success creates a new problem. Saul becomes jealous. When the people begin praising David, Saul's heart fills with envy. The same king who once welcomed David into his service now tries repeatedly to kill him. David spends years running, hiding in caves, living as a fugitive. Yet during those years, David has multiple opportunities to kill Saul. Twice, Saul falls directly into David's hands. Twice, David refuses. Because David understands something important. If God made the promise, God will fulfill it. David refuses to take the throne by force. He chooses patience over revenge, trust over ambition. As the book comes to an end, Israel once again faces the Philistines. This time, the battle ends in tragedy. Saul's sons are killed, including Jonathan, David's closest friend. Then Saul is wounded. Rather than being captured, Saul falls on his own sword. Israel's first king dies. The reign that began with such promise ends in heartbreak. And with Saul's death, one chapter closes. Another is about to begin. Because David has been preparing for this moment all along. Not simply to become a king, but to become the kind of leader after God's own heart. And that's really the message of 1 Samuel. God isn't looking for the strongest person, the tallest, the most talented, or the most impressive. He's looking for hearts that are willing to trust him. Again and again, the book contrasts outward appearances with inward character. Saul looked like a king. David had the heart of one. So here's the question 1 Samuel leaves us with. What are you relying on more, your own strength, or God's guidance? Because 1 Samuel reminds us that God often chooses the people the world overlooks. And he can accomplish extraordinary things through ordinary people who are willing to trust him. Because while people often judge by what they can see, God has always been looking at the heart.